There are people today living under pressure they cannot explain. Fear follows them. Anxiety drains them. Confusion clouds their mind. They wake up tired, go to sleep discouraged, and wonder why peace feels so far away. But what many people fail to realize is this: some battles are not only natural, they are spiritual. And spiritual battles cannot always be solved with natural answers. That is why prayer is so powerful. Not empty repetition, not religious performance, but real faith-filled prayer. You may think 7 minutes is too small to matter, but never underestimate what can happen when a heart is fully focused, fully believing, and fully connected to God. One moment of sincere prayer can shift an atmosphere that months of worry could never change. The problem is that many people spend more time feeding fear than feeding faith. They think about problems constantly. They replay negative thoughts daily. They speak defeat over their future, and without realizing it, they create an atmosphere where darkness feels comfortable. But prayer changes the atmosphere. When a person begins to pray with faith, heaven responds. Peace begins to enter the mind. Strength rises inside the spirit. Fear begins to lose its grip. Confusion starts to break. Why? Because darkness cannot remain where faith is boldly spoken. There is authority in prayer, not because of human strength, but because prayer connects you to divine power greater than any fear, attack, or obstacle you face. The enemy wants people silent, discouraged, and hopeless, because a silent believer becomes weak, but a praying believer becomes dangerous to darkness. You do not need hours to begin shifting the spiritual atmosphere around your life. Sometimes 7 focused minutes of prayer can do more than 7 days of worrying. Think about that. 7 minutes of declaring faith instead of fear. 7 minutes of speaking life instead of defeat. 7 minutes of trusting God instead of magnifying problems. That kind of prayer releases power. Angels are not activated by panic. They are activated through faith, obedience, and words aligned with God's promises. Every time you pray with confidence, you are releasing spiritual authority into your situation. Even when you cannot see movement physically, things begin shifting spiritually. Many people quit praying because they expect immediate visible results. But spiritual things often begin unseen before they become visible. Just because you cannot see, change instantly does not mean nothing is happening. Prayer works behind the scenes. While you are praying, strength is increasing. While you are praying, fear is weakening. While you are praying, doors are beginning to open. While you are praying, heaven is already moving in ways your eyes cannot yet perceive. And one of the greatest weapons against darkness is your words. Words filled with faith carry spiritual power. Say, I refuse to live in fear. Peace rules my mind. No darkness has authority over my life. I am protected. I am strengthened. I walk in divine favor. God is fighting battles I cannot see. When you speak like that, something changes within you. Your spirit becomes stronger than your fear. Your faith becomes louder than your doubt. Darkness survives where fear dominates, but darkness retreats where faith rises. Many people are waiting for circumstances to improve before they pray confidently. But faith prays before results appear. Faith believes before evidence becomes visible. That is what gives prayer power, and consistency matters. 7 minutes today may seem small, but daily prayer creates spiritual momentum. Every day you pray, your confidence grows. Every day you pray, your mind becomes clearer. Every day you pray, your spirit becomes stronger. Eventually, what once overwhelmed you no longer controls you. Prayer also sharpens discernment. It helps you recognize what belongs in your life and what does not. Some people carry heaviness because they are constantly surrounded by negativity, fear, and hopeless thinking. But prayer renews the mind. It breaks inner oppression and restores spiritual clarity. There are people listening right now who feel exhausted mentally and emotionally. You have carried burdens silently. You have fought battles privately. But hear this clearly. Darkness is not stronger than the power of God working through a life filled with faith and prayer. You are not powerless. There is authority inside. Sincere prayer. There is protection in God's presence. There is peace available even during chaos. And sometimes all it takes is 7 focused minutes to reconnect your heart with heaven and remind darkness that it cannot control your future. Do not underestimate simple acts of faith. One prayer can restore hope. One prayer can break fear. One prayer can renew strength. One prayer can change the atmosphere of your home, your mind, and your future. The enemy wants you distracted. He wants you discouraged. He wants you too busy, too tired, and too doubtful to pray, because prayer changes things. Prayer activates faith. Prayer releases peace. Prayer strengthens the spirit. Prayer destroys darkness. So begin today. Set aside 7 focused minutes. Shut out the noise. Speak faith boldly. Pray with confidence. Declare peace over your life. Declare victory over fear. Declare light over every dark situation. And remember this: heaven moves when faith prays. Darkness trembles when believers refuse to stay silent. And the atmosphere around your life can change in just one powerful moment of prayer. Many people underestimate the power of a single moment with God. They believe transformation only comes through long hours of effort, emotional experiences, or dramatic events. Because of this, they often overlook the incredible impact that even a few sincere minutes of prayer can have on their life. But the truth is, even 7 minutes of focused, faith-filled prayer can begin shifting the atmosphere around you in ways you cannot immediately see. Atmospheres are real. Every person carries one. Some homes feel heavy with tension, fear, and negativity. Some minds feel crowded with anxiety, confusion, and exhaustion. Some people walk through life constantly overwhelmed, not realizing they have been living under a spiritual weight that affects their peace, thoughts, and emotions. The atmosphere around a person influences how they think, speak, and respond to life. And one of the fastest ways to change that atmosphere is through prayer. Prayer is more than speaking words into the air. It is connecting with divine power greater than fear, greater than confusion, and greater than darkness. When a person begins to pray sincerely, even for a few minutes, something begins to shift internally first. Their focus moves away from problems and toward possibility. Their attention moves away from fear and toward faith, and that shift alone starts changing the atmosphere within them. Many people spend hours feeding anxiety every day without realizing it. They replay negative thoughts repeatedly. They focus on bad news, past failures, financial struggles, and uncertain futures. Over time, these thoughts create a heavy emotional and spiritual environment. Fear becomes normal. Stress becomes constant. Peace feels distant. But 7 minutes of sincere prayer interrupts that cycle. When you pray with faith, you invite peace into places where fear once ruled. You invite clarity where confusion once dominated. You invite strength into areas where weakness tried to take control. This is why prayer is so powerful. It changes what fear has been building for weeks, months, or even years. One sincere prayer can calm a restless mind. One sincere prayer can break emotional heaviness. One sincere prayer can remind a discouraged heart that hope still exists. The problem is not that prayer lacks power. The problem is that many people approach prayer casually, distracted, or without expectation. They repeat words while their heart remains disconnected. But sincere prayer carries focus, belief, and honesty. It is not about impressing others or performing religious routines. It is about opening your heart before God with genuine faith. 7 minutes may seem small in comparison to the size of life's challenges, but spiritual transformation does not always begin with length. It begins with sincerity. A short moment fully surrendered to faith can produce more peace than hours spent worrying. Think about how quickly fear can affect a person. Sometimes one negative phone call can ruin an entire day. One discouraging conversation can fill the mind with anxiety. If negativity can shift your atmosphere quickly, then faith-filled prayer can shift it as well. Prayer changes the environment around your thinking. Before prayer, problems may appear larger than your strength, but after prayer, confidence begins to rise again. Circumstances may not change immediately, but your perspective starts changing. And perspective is powerful because it affects how you handle every situation. A person overwhelmed by fear sees obstacles everywhere. A person strengthened by prayer sees possibilities again. This is why even a few focused minutes matter. They reconnect your spirit with peace and remind your heart that you are not fighting life's battles alone. Prayer also brings spiritual awareness. Many people live constantly distracted, mentally exhausted, and emotionally drained because they are disconnected from inner peace. But when they pause and pray sincerely, they begin hearing clearly again. Their thoughts settle, their emotions calm down. Wisdom becomes easier to recognize. Sometimes people search everywhere for answers while neglecting the very thing that could restore clarity inside them. Prayer creates stillness in a noisy world, and in that stillness, strength returns. Another reason prayer changes atmospheres is because it affects the words people speak afterward. A fearful person speaks defeat constantly. I can't handle this. Nothing will improve. I'm overwhelmed. But after spending time in sincere prayer, the tone begins to shift. I believe things can change. I am not alone. I will get through this. Peace is returning to my life. Faith-filled words create a different atmosphere than fear-filled words. The environment around your life responds to what you repeatedly allow into your mind and spirit. If fear dominates daily, heaviness increases. But if prayer becomes consistent, peace begins growing stronger than anxiety. This does not mean challenges disappear instantly. Difficult seasons still happen. Problems still exist. But prayer changes the way a person carries those burdens. Instead of collapsing under pressure, they begin standing with renewed strength, and consistency deepens the transformation. 7 minutes today may bring peace. 7 minutes tomorrow may restore confidence. 7 minutes every day can completely reshape your spiritual atmosphere over time. Little by little, fear loses control. Little by little, hope rises again. Little by little, your mind becomes stronger, calmer, and more stable. Many breakthroughs begin internally before they become visible externally. God often strengthens the spirit before changing the situation. Why? Because inner peace allows people to handle external challenges with wisdom and faith instead of panic. Never underestimate small moments of sincere connection with God. Some of the greatest changes in life begin quietly. A person may not feel dramatic emotions immediately, but something inside starts healing, strengthening, and shifting. The darkness that once felt overwhelming begins losing its grip. The heaviness starts lifting, the fear becomes weaker, and peace slowly takes its place. All because someone chose to stop feeding fear and start feeding faith, even if only for 7 sincere minutes. There are many things happening in life that human eyes cannot fully see or understand. People often depend only on what is visible, measurable, and explainable. They trust their own strength, their own plans, and their own understanding. But there comes a point in life where human ability alone is not enough. There are battles too deep for logic, burdens too heavy for effort alone, and situations too complex for natural solutions. That is where prayer becomes powerful, because prayer activates divine help that works beyond human understanding. Divine help is not limited by human limitations. It is not restricted by time, distance, or visible circumstances. When a person prays sincerely with faith, they connect with a power greater than fear, greater than confusion, and greater than any obstacle standing before them. Many people underestimate what happens spiritually when they pray because they only expect immediate physical evidence. But prayer often begins working in unseen ways long before visible results appear. 1 of the greatest mistakes people make is assuming that if they cannot see movement, nothing is happening. But spiritual activity often begins quietly. Answers begin forming behind the scenes. Strength begins increasing internally. Protection begins surrounding areas you cannot even recognize yet. Divine help does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it works silently while your faith keeps moving forward. Prayer is not simply emotional comfort. It is a spiritual connection. It is opening your heart to receive strength, wisdom, direction, peace, and protection that cannot be produced naturally. Human strength eventually becomes exhausted. Human understanding reaches limits, but divine help reaches beyond those limits. There are moments in life where people suddenly avoid danger they never knew existed. There are times when opportunities appear unexpectedly. There are seasons where strength arrives during moments that should have caused complete collapse. Many of these moments are connected to divine help working quietly in the background. The problem is that modern life trains people to trust only what they can explain. If something cannot be measured physically, they often dismiss it. But some of the greatest forces shaping human life are invisible. Fear is invisible, yet it controls many lives. Anxiety is invisible, yet it drains energy daily. Love is invisible, yet it transforms hearts. In the same way, divine help may be unseen physically, but its impact becomes visible over time. Prayer activates spiritual assistance because prayer invites heaven into earthly situations. It acknowledges that there is wisdom beyond human understanding and power beyond human strength. A person who prays consistently develops confidence not only in themselves but also in the divine support surrounding them. Fear weakens people because it makes them feel isolated and helpless. It convinces them they must carry every burden alone. But prayer reminds the heart that help exists beyond what human eyes can see. This awareness changes the atmosphere within a person. Anxiety begins losing its control because faith starts growing stronger. Divine help also brings wisdom. Many people think prayer only changes external situations, but one of the greatest answers to prayer is often direction and clarity. Sometimes the miracle is not immediate escape from difficulty. Sometimes the miracle is receiving wisdom to navigate the difficulty successfully. A person connected to divine help becomes calmer under pressure. While others panic, they remain steady. While others collapse emotionally, they continue trusting. Why? Because they believe unseen support is working in their favor even when circumstances remain uncertain. This kind of faith changes behavior. Instead of reacting emotionally to every challenge, a person begins responding with peace and confidence. They stop allowing fear to control every decision. They begin expecting guidance, favor, and protection. Prayer also strengthens inner endurance. Life can become exhausting when people try to carry everything through personal effort alone. Worry drains energy. Stress weakens the mind. Constant fear creates emotional heaviness. But prayer renews spiritual strength. It restores peace to the heart and stability to the mind. Many people experience moments where they feel suddenly strengthened after praying. Their problems may still exist externally, but internally they no longer feel defeated. That is divine help working within them. Sometimes the greatest miracle is not immediate removal of the battle, but receiving strength greater than the battle itself. Another important truth is that divine help often works through unexpected channels. Opportunities, relationships, protection, favor, ideas, and sudden breakthroughs may all become instruments of answered prayer. What seemed impossible one season suddenly begins shifting in another. And many times people later realize that unseen help had been guiding them long before they understood it. This is why faith matters so much during prayer. Doubt focuses only on visible limitations. Faith recognizes that unseen possibilities still exist. Faith believes that heaven can move where human strength cannot. People often become discouraged because they expect instant results from every prayer. But spiritual things do not always operate according to human timing. Sometimes answers develop gradually. Sometimes protection occurs without your awareness. Sometimes divine help is preventing problems you never even realized were coming. Prayer is never wasted. Every sincere prayer strengthens connection with God. Every sincere prayer invites peace into the mind. Every sincere prayer activates help beyond human ability. And over time, the atmosphere around a person changes because they no longer live with the same fear and hopelessness that once controlled them. They begin walking differently, thinking differently, speaking differently. Why? Because they know they are not alone. They understand that unseen help is real, active, and powerful. Even when life feels uncertain, they trust that divine wisdom is guiding them, divine peace is strengthening them, and divine protection is surrounding them. And that confidence becomes stronger than fear. The world may only believe in what it can see, but prayer reminds people that some of the greatest forms of help operate beyond human understanding. And when a person truly understands that, they begin living with peace, courage, and expectation no matter what challenges stand before them. Darkness thrives in silence, fear, and hopelessness. It grows stronger when people feel defeated, discouraged, and spiritually weak. Many individuals do not realize how powerful their words truly are. They speak fear daily, repeat negative thoughts constantly, and unknowingly create an atmosphere where anxiety, oppression, and confusion continue to grow. But the moment faith-filled words are spoken boldly, something begins to shift. Darkness starts losing its power because faith carries spiritual authority greater than fear. Words are not empty sounds. They carry direction, influence, and spiritual weight. Every day, people speak life or death over their future without realizing it. A person who constantly says, "Nothing will ever change," "I'm always struggling," or "I'll never overcome this," slowly trains their mind to expect defeat. Fear becomes stronger because their words continue feeding it. But faith-filled words interrupt that cycle. When someone boldly speaks words of hope, confidence, and trust in God, they create a completely different atmosphere. Instead of feeding fear, they begin feeding faith. Instead of strengthening darkness, they begin weakening its influence over their mind and spirit. This is why speaking boldly matters. Darkness wants people silent. It wants them trapped inside negative thinking. It wants fear to dominate their thoughts so completely that they stop believing breakthrough is possible. But faith speaks even when circumstances still look difficult. Faith declares victory before visible evidence appears. Faith refuses to agree with hopelessness. Many people wait until they feel strong before they speak confidently. But faith often speaks strength before emotions catch up. There are moments when a person may feel weak internally, but they still choose to declare, "I will not be defeated. Peace is returning to my life. Fear has no authority over me. God is greater than my situation." Those declarations may seem simple, but they begin changing the spiritual atmosphere around that person. Why? Because darkness cannot remain comfortable where faith is constantly being spoken. Fear and faith cannot dominate the same atmosphere equally. One eventually becomes stronger than the other depending on what is consistently fed. If a person constantly feeds fear through negative words, anxious thinking, and hopeless speech, darkness gains influence. But when a person consistently feeds faith through prayer, praise, and bold declarations, fear begins losing ground. One reason darkness loses power when faith-filled words are spoken is because words shape internal belief. What you repeatedly say eventually influences what you deeply believe. A person who constantly speaks defeat eventually feels defeated emotionally and spiritually. But a person who speaks faith begins developing inner confidence even before circumstances improve. Faith-filled words renew the mind. The human mind is constantly listening to the words spoken aloud. Negative speech creates tension, stress, and discouragement. But words of faith create peace, strength, and expectation. This is why speaking boldly matters so much during difficult seasons. Your words either strengthen your spirit or weaken it. There are people today trapped under emotional heaviness because they have spent years speaking fear. Every challenge becomes proof that life will never improve. Every setback becomes confirmation that failure is permanent. Over time, darkness builds strongholds through repeated hopeless thinking. But those strongholds can begin breaking when faith starts speaking louder than fear. A person may not immediately feel dramatic changes externally, but internally something begins shifting. Hope starts rising again. Confidence begins returning. The heaviness starts weakening. Why? Because spoken faith changes the atmosphere of the heart and mind. This principle is especially powerful during prayer. Prayer filled with faith carries authority. It is not weak, fearful begging. It is bold trust in God's power and presence. When someone prays confidently, declaring truth over fear, they are resisting darkness directly. There is something powerful about hearing your own voice declare victory instead of defeat. Say, "I refuse to live in fear. I am protected. I am guided. My mind is filled with peace. No darkness can control my future. God's presence surrounds me." These are not merely motivational statements. They are spiritual declarations that strengthen faith and weaken fear. Darkness often attacks the mind first. It fills thoughts with confusion, worry, anxiety, and hopelessness. If those thoughts remain unchecked, they eventually shape emotions and behavior. But faith-filled words interrupt those patterns. They replace fearful thinking with spiritual truth. Another reason darkness loses power when faith-filled words are spoken boldly is because boldness itself is an act of resistance. Fear wants people intimidated and passive. It wants them believing they are powerless. But bold faith refuses to surrender mentally or spiritually. A person speaking faith boldly is declaring, "I will not allow fear to rule me. I trust God more than I trust my anxiety. I believe peace is greater than this pressure." That kind of confidence weakens darkness because darkness depends heavily on fear to maintain control. Faith also changes focus. Fear constantly magnifies problems. It makes obstacles appear larger than solutions. But faith magnifies God's ability instead of the problem itself. This shift in focus changes emotional and spiritual energy completely. The more a person speaks faith, the stronger their inner world becomes. And eventually, what once overwhelmed them no longer controls them the same way. Challenges may still exist, but fear no longer dominates their response. This is why consistency matters. One bold declaration helps, but daily faith-filled speech creates lasting transformation. Every day you speak peace instead of panic, hope instead of hopelessness, and faith instead of fear. You are weakening darkness little by little. Eventually, the atmosphere changes. Peace becomes stronger than anxiety. Confidence becomes stronger than insecurity. Faith becomes stronger than fear. And once faith becomes stronger than fear, darkness begins losing the authority it once seemed to have. That is the power of boldly spoken, faith-filled words. They remind the heart that no matter how dark life may feel at times, fear does not have the final word. Faith does. Consistent prayer does far more than create temporary emotional relief. It builds spiritual strength, develops inner stability, and produces a peace that remains steady even during difficult seasons of life. Many people only pray occasionally, usually when problems become overwhelming. In moments of crisis, they suddenly seek God with urgency. But once pressure decreases, prayer often fades into the background again. Because of this inconsistency, their spiritual life remains weak, unstable, and easily shaken by circumstances. But when prayer becomes consistent, something powerful begins to happen within a person. Spiritual strength is not built overnight. Just as physical muscles grow through repeated exercise, spiritual strength grows through repeated connection with God. Every sincere moment of prayer strengthens the inner person little by little. It may not always feel dramatic in the beginning, but consistency creates transformation over time. Many people underestimate small daily habits because they expect instant results. But some of the greatest changes in life happen gradually. Prayer works the same way. A single prayer can bring peace, but a lifestyle of prayer builds endurance, confidence, wisdom, and stability. Consistent prayer changes how a person responds to pressure. Without prayer, life's challenges often create panic, fear, and emotional exhaustion. People become overwhelmed by uncertainty because they are trying to carry every burden through human strength alone. But prayer reconnects the heart with divine peace. It reminds people they are not fighting alone. This awareness changes everything. A person strengthened through prayer may still face difficulties, but they do not collapse under pressure the same way they once did. Why? Because prayer develops inner resilience. It creates spiritual stability that remains firm even when external situations become unstable. Inner peace is one of the greatest gifts consistent prayer produces. The world is filled with noise, stress, and constant distraction. People wake up worried, spend their days anxious, and go to sleep mentally exhausted. Their minds never truly rest because fear and pressure constantly surround them. But prayer quiets the inner chaos. When a person consistently spends time in prayer, their thoughts begin slowing down. Anxiety loses intensity. Fear no longer dominates every moment. Instead of carrying constant heaviness, they begin experiencing calmness within their spirit. This peace does not always come because problems disappear immediately. Sometimes circumstances remain difficult externally while peace grows internally. That is what makes spiritual peace so powerful. It does not depend completely on favorable conditions. Anyone can feel peaceful when everything is easy. but prayer produces peace that survives difficult seasons. Consistent prayer also strengthens faith. Faith grows through repeated trust and connection with God. The more a person prays, the more they begin recognizing God's faithfulness in different areas of life. Over time, confidence increases because they remember how prayers were answered, how strength arrived during weakness, and how peace appeared during chaos. This history of faith builds spiritual courage. Instead of reacting fear every time challenges appear, a praying person becomes steadier emotionally and spiritually. They still feel pressure, but pressure no longer controls them completely. They understand that prayer gives access to strength greater than the problem itself. Prayer also protects the mind. Many battles begin mentally long before they appear externally. Negative thoughts, fear, hopelessness, and discouragement constantly attempt to dominate the mind. Without spiritual discipline, these thoughts can easily grow stronger over time. But consistent prayer renews the mind daily. It replaces fear with faith. It replaces confusion with clarity. It replaces heaviness with hope. This mental renewal is extremely important because thoughts shape emotions, decisions, and behavior. A fearful mind creates a fearful life, but a mind strengthened through prayer begins responding differently to challenges. Another powerful effect of consistent prayer is emotional healing. Many people carry hidden wounds, disappointments, regrets, and emotional burdens deep within them. Outwardly, they continue functioning, but inwardly they feel exhausted and broken. Prayer creates space for healing to begin. During sincere prayer, burdens become lighter. Emotional pressure begins releasing. A person who felt overwhelmed suddenly feels comforted and strengthened. This healing may happen gradually, but over time, prayer restores emotional balance and inner peace. Consistency also builds spiritual sensitivity. A person who prays regularly becomes more aware of what influences their spirit positively or negatively. They become more discerning about relationships, environments, habits, and decisions. Why? Because prayer sharpens spiritual awareness. Without prayer, people often live distracted and reactive. They make decisions emotionally and become easily influenced by fear or pressure. But prayer slows the mind down and allows wisdom to guide decisions instead of panic. One reason many people struggle spiritually because they depend on occasional motivation instead of daily connection with God. Inspiration can encourage temporarily, but consistency creates lasting transformation. A strong spiritual life is not built through random moments of prayer alone. It is built through daily commitment. Even short moments of sincere prayer matter when practiced consistently. 5 minutes daily can strengthen the spirit. 7 minutes daily can renew the mind. Small daily prayers create long-term spiritual growth. And over time, prayer becomes less like a duty and more like a source of strength and peace. A person begins craving the calmness and clarity that prayer brings. There is also protection in consistent prayer. A spiritually strong person becomes harder for fear, discouragement, and darkness to control. Why? Because their spirit remains connected to God regularly. They recover faster from setbacks. They resist negativity more effectively. They maintain hope during difficult seasons. This does not mean life becomes perfect. Challenges still exist. But consistent prayer changes how a person walks through those challenges. Instead of panic, there is peace. Instead of collapse, there is endurance. Instead of hopelessness, there is expectation. Prayer becomes an anchor during storms. And perhaps one of the most beautiful things about consistent prayer is that it reminds the heart daily that God is near. No matter how uncertain life becomes, a praying person carries the quiet assurance that they are supported, guided, and strengthened by something greater than themselves. That assurance produces peace no circumstance can fully destroy. And little by little, day after day, consistent prayer transforms the entire atmosphere of a person's life from fear and instability into strength, confidence, and lasting inner peace. The words a person speaks every day are far more powerful than most people realize. Speech is not just communication, it is creation in motion. What you repeatedly say begins to shape the way you think, the way you feel, and ultimately the direction your life begins to move in. Many people live under limitation not because they lack ability, but because they constantly reinforce those limitations through their own words. A person who continuously speaks defeat slowly trains their mind to accept defeat as normal. Phrases like, "I can't," "I never succeed," or "nothing works for me" may seem harmless at first, but over time they become inner beliefs. And once something becomes an inner belief, it begins to influence decisions, actions, and expectations. Without realizing it, a person can imprison themselves with the very words they speak. But when faith-filled speech is consistently practiced, something powerful begins to shift. Instead of reinforcing fear, the mind begins to align with hope. Instead of expecting failure, a person begins expecting possibility. Instead of focusing only on limitations, they begin to see opportunities. This is why speaking faith is not just positive thinking, it is spiritual alignment. It is choosing to agree with hope instead of fear, with possibility instead of limitation, with strength instead of weakness. Every time a person speaks faith, they are reshaping their internal atmosphere. Words also influence emotional state. If someone constantly speaks fear, anxiety increases. If someone constantly speaks negativity, discouragement deepens. But if someone begins speaking life, peace starts to rise within them. The mind and heart respond strongly to spoken language because words are repeated thoughts expressed outwardly. Many people pray for change but continue speaking the opposite of what they are praying for. They ask for peace but speak worry. They ask for breakthrough but speak failure. They ask for hope but speak despair. This creates internal conflict. But when words and prayer begin to align, faith becomes stronger and more effective in the life of a person. Speaking faith does not mean ignoring reality. It means refusing to let present circumstances define the final outcome. It is acknowledging challenges while still declaring a higher truth over them. A person of faith does not deny problems, they simply refuse to give problems the final authority over their future. There is power in repetition. What you hear yourself say repeatedly becomes deeply rooted in your mindset. That is why negative speech is so damaging. It is reinforced daily until it becomes identity. But the same principle works in the opposite direction. When a person consistently speaks words of hope, confidence, and trust, those words begin to reshape identity from within. Over time, faith-filled speech changes how a person carries themselves. Their posture changes, their confidence increases, their expectations rise. Even in uncertain situations, they begin to carry a quiet assurance that things can work out. One of the greatest benefits of speaking faith is that it strengthens perseverance. Life is not always smooth. Delays happen, doors close, challenges appear unexpectedly. In those moments, negative speech can cause a person to quit too early. But faith-filled words help them stay grounded. They remind the heart that temporary struggles do not define permanent outcomes. When a person says, "I will overcome this even in difficulty," they are strengthening their inner endurance. When they say, "Things are shifting in my favor," they are training their mind to look for possibilities instead of surrendering to defeat. These declarations matter because they shape mental resilience. Faith-filled words also influence how a person responds to opportunities. A negative mindset often overlooks possibilities because it expects nothing good. But a faith-filled mindset becomes more aware, more open, and more expectant. It begins noticing doors that were previously ignored. Another important effect of speaking faith is the transformation of internal dialogue. Every person has an ongoing conversation within their mind. If that inner conversation is filled with fear, the emotional state becomes unstable. But when a person intentionally speaks words of faith, they begin to overwrite that internal negativity with truth and hope. This is not instant change, it is gradual transformation. Day by day, word by word, belief begins to shift. And as belief shifts, behavior follows. Eventually, a person who once spoke defeat begins speaking victory naturally. Faith-filled speech also creates spiritual atmosphere. Words influence not only the mind, but also the inner spiritual environment. When faith is spoken consistently, fear loses strength. Anxiety begins to weaken. Hope becomes more dominant. A person begins to feel lighter internally because their speech is no longer feeding negativity. One of the most powerful practices is speaking life over your future daily. Not occasionally, not only during motivation, but consistently. Saying things like, "My future is full of possibilities. God is guiding my steps. Opportunities are coming my way. I will not be defined by my current situation." These declarations may seem simple, but over time they reshape expectation. And expectation is powerful because it influences how a person lives each day. People often wait for their circumstances to change before changing their speech. But faith operates differently. Faith changes speech first, even when circumstances remain unchanged. Because what you speak today is preparing your mindset for tomorrow. Eventually, as faith-filled speech becomes consistent, a transformation takes place. Fear loses its dominance. Confidence increases. Peace grows stronger. And even during difficult seasons, a person carries a steady belief that things are working together for their good. Because words are not just sounds, they are seeds. And every seed spoken in faith eventually produces a harvest of strength, hope, and transformation in the life of the one who speaks them consistently. Gratitude is one of the most powerful spiritual attitudes a person can develop, yet it is often the most overlooked. Many people spend their lives focusing on what is missing, what is not working, and what has not yet happened. Because of this constant focus on lack, their minds remain in a cycle of dissatisfaction and frustration. But gratitude changes everything. It shifts attention away from limitation and redirects it toward appreciation. And in doing so, it opens the heart to receive more. A thankful heart does not deny challenges, but it refuses to be controlled by them. It acknowledges difficulties while still recognizing blessings that already exist. This simple shift in perspective carries great power. When a person begins to focus on what they do have instead of what they lack, something begins to change internally. Their emotional state becomes lighter. Their thinking becomes clearer. Their spirit becomes more open to peace and possibility. Many people think blessings come only after circumstances improve, but often improvement begins when gratitude appears first. A thankful mindset creates a spiritual atmosphere where growth becomes easier. Complaining, on the other hand, creates resistance within the mind and heart. The more a person complains, the more they train themselves to see only problems. Over time, this weakens expectation and diminishes hope. Gratitude works differently. It strengthens expectation. When a person regularly gives thanks, even for small things, they begin to recognize that life still contains goodness. And when the mind starts recognizing goodness, it becomes more receptive to receiving even greater blessings. There is a deep connection between gratitude and awareness. Many opportunities go unnoticed not because they are absent, but because the mind is too focused on what is wrong to recognize what is right. A grateful person becomes more alert to possibilities. They notice favor in small moments. They recognize open doors that others ignore. Gratitude sharpens perception. Another powerful effect of gratitude is emotional stability. A thankful person is less easily shaken by temporary setbacks because their attention is not locked onto one negative situation. Instead, their mind is balanced by awareness of past blessings, present opportunities, and future possibilities. This balance creates inner strength. People who lack gratitude often experience emotional extremes. They feel high when things go well and deeply discouraged when things go wrong. But gratitude creates steadiness. It anchors the heart in appreciation, making it less vulnerable to emotional collapse during difficult times. Gratitude also strengthens patience. When a person is thankful, they begin to trust that what is already working in their life is evidence that more good things can come. This reduces anxiety about timing. Instead of rushing or forcing outcomes, they begin to wait with confidence. They understand that delays do not mean denial, and that good things often develop gradually. Another important truth is that gratitude changes how a person speaks. A thankful person does not constantly complain or express negativity. Their words become more positive, more hopeful, and more life-giving. This shift in speech also influences their mindset, because what you repeatedly say reinforces what you believe. When gratitude becomes a daily habit, it transforms internal dialogue. Instead of saying, "Nothing is going right," a grateful person begins to notice and say, "Some things are actually improving." Instead of focusing only on problems, they begin acknowledging progress. This shift may seem small, but over time, it creates a powerful mental and spiritual transformation. Gratitude also attracts favor in relationships. People are naturally drawn to those who appreciate life rather than constantly complaining about it. A thankful attitude creates warmth, humility, and positivity. These qualities open doors that negativity often closes. People are more willing to help, support, and trust someone who carries a grateful spirit. One of the most powerful aspects of gratitude is that it prepares the heart for greater blessings. A person who cannot appreciate small things will often struggle to recognize larger blessings when they arrive. But when gratitude is practiced consistently, the heart becomes ready to handle increase with humility and wisdom. Gratitude also deepens trust. When a person looks back and remembers how far they have already come, how many difficulties they have already survived, and how many unexpected blessings have already appeared, their faith grows stronger. They begin to realize that their life is not random. There has been guidance, provision, and help along the way, even during difficult seasons. This awareness builds confidence for the future. Instead of expecting failure, a grateful person begins expecting continued goodness. They carry a quiet assurance that if good has happened before, it can happen again. This expectation becomes a powerful force that influences how they approach life. Even in difficult seasons, gratitude does not disappear. It simply shifts focus. Instead of denying pain, it finds something still worth appreciating. Even in struggle, there is always something that remains: breath, strength, lessons learned, or support received. Recognizing even small blessings during hard times keeps hope alive. Over time, gratitude becomes a lifestyle rather than a reaction. It is no longer something practiced only when things go well, but something maintained even during challenges. And this consistency transforms the inner world of a person completely. A grateful person walks differently. They think differently. They respond differently to pressure. They are less easily discouraged because their focus is not locked on what is missing. Instead, they carry awareness of what is already working and trust that more goodness is still unfolding. And in that atmosphere of gratitude, something powerful happens. The heart becomes more open, the mind becomes more peaceful, and life begins to feel less like struggle and more like progress. Because gratitude does not just recognize blessings, it creates the inner condition where greater blessings and favor are more easily received and appreciated. Expectation is one of the most powerful forces shaping a person's life, yet many people live without realizing how much it influences their outcomes. What you consistently expect in your heart eventually affects how you think, how you speak, and how you act. A person who expects failure begins to move cautiously, hesitantly, and often avoids opportunities that could lead to growth. But a person who expects favor carries a completely different mindset. They move with confidence, openness, and readiness for possibility. Expectation is not just wishful thinking, it is an internal posture that shapes how a person experiences life. When expectation is filled with fear, life feels heavy, uncertain, and limited. But when expectation is filled with faith, life begins to feel open, hopeful, and full of potential. The difference is not always in the external situation, but in the internal outlook. Many people underestimate how much expectation influences daily decisions. A person who expects nothing good to happen often overlooks opportunities even when they appear. They dismiss ideas too quickly. They assume doors will remain closed. Because of this mindset, they unconsciously limit themselves. But when expectation shifts, perception changes. The same person begins to notice possibilities they previously ignored. Expectation also affects emotional strength. If a person wakes up expecting struggle, their emotional energy becomes drained before the day even begins. But if they wake up expecting favor, guidance, and opportunities, their emotional state becomes more stable and optimistic. This expectation creates momentum for the rest of the day. One of the most powerful truths about expectation is that it prepares the mind for outcomes before they arrive. A person who expects failure often feels defeated before anything even happens. But a person who expects breakthrough remains steady even during delays because they believe something good is still developing. Expectation is closely connected to faith. Faith believes, but expectation anticipates. Faith says it is possible. Expectation says it is coming. When both work together, they create a strong inner alignment that influences behavior and decisions. A person operating in faith-filled expectation becomes more willing to take steps forward, even in uncertain conditions. Many people miss opportunities not because they are not available, but because their expectation filters them out. If a person expects nothing new or good, they become blind to change happening around. But when expectation is alive, even small signs of progress become meaningful. They begin to recognize doors, connections, and ideas that others overlook. Expectation also plays a major role in persistence. Life is filled with delays, setbacks, and challenges. During those times, expectation determines whether a person continues or gives up. If expectation is low, even small obstacles feel like confirmation of failure. But if expectation is strong, obstacles are seen as temporary and part of the process, not the end of the journey. There is also a strong connection between expectation and resilience. A person who expects nothing good becomes easily discouraged, but a person who expects favor and breakthrough can endure longer seasons of difficulty without losing hope. Their expectation becomes a source of internal strength that carries them through uncertainty. Expectation influences speech as well. People naturally speak about what they expect. A person expecting failure speaks feet. A person expecting success speaks hope. Over time, these spoken expectations reinforce internal belief systems. Words and expectation work together to shape mindset. Another important aspect is that expectation shapes how a person interprets events. Two people can experience the same situation but interpret it differently based on what they expect. One sees failure, the other sees learning or opportunity. One becomes discouraged, the other becomes motivated. The difference lies not in the situation itself, but in expectation. Expectation also prepares the heart for future blessings. When a person lives with a consistent expectation of good, they become emotionally and mentally ready to receive it when it arrives. Without expectation, even blessings can feel surprising or unrecognized. But with expectation, a person becomes aware and appreciative of what unfolds in their life. It is important to understand that expectation is built over time. It is shaped by repeated thoughts, repeated words, and repeated focus. If a person constantly focuses on problems, expectation becomes negative. But if they consistently focus on possibilities, gratitude, and faith, expectation becomes positive. Even during difficult seasons, expectation can be maintained. It does not require perfect conditions. It simply requires a decision to believe that something better is still possible. That decision keeps hope alive even when circumstances have not yet changed.